The data made no sense. Dr. Amira Hassan had been staring at the same spreadsheet for 3 hours, and the pattern only became more impossible with every passing minute. She worked alone in her small laboratory on Research Station Tau 7, surrounded by screens showing wildlife footage from a dozen different planets. The station orbited a designated preserve world, far from the populated centers of the galaxy. Amira specialized in predator behavior. She had spent 15 years studying how apex hunters across different worlds raised their offspring, how they protected their territories, and how they interacted with other species. She thought she understood the rules. Predators were cautious. They hid their young. They attacked anything that came near their nests or dens, except when humans were involved. 3 separate incidents had occurred in the past month. 3 different species on 3 different worlds all doing the same strange thing. They were bringing their young to human settlements. Not attacking, not threatening. Simply leaving their offspring near human outposts and watching from a distance. The first incident involved the Wrathcore of Verdant 9. These creatures were massive reptilian hunters, each one weighing nearly 400 kilograms. Their scales contained crystalline structures that could cut through steel when they moved at full speed. A single adult Wrathcore could tear apart a transport vehicle. They were solitary, territorial, and extremely protective of their young. 2 weeks ago, a female Wrathcore had walked right up to the fence of a human agricultural station. Security footage showed her carrying something in her jaws. She set it down carefully, just 3 meters from the fence, then retreated into the forest. The humans found a Wrathcore hatchling, no more than a few days old. It had a broken leg and several deep cuts across its body. The farmers could have left it there. They should have left it there. Approaching an injured predator, even a juvenile one, violated every safety protocol, but they did not leave it. They brought the hatchling inside, splinted its leg, and cleaned its wounds. They fed it and kept it warm. The mother Wrathcore never left. She stayed in the forest, visible on the security cameras. She watched her offspring receive care from these strange, soft-skinned creatures who should have been prey. Amira had initially dismissed this as an anomaly. Perhaps the mother was injured too. Perhaps she was desperate. But then the second incident happened on Horizon 4. Shrike hawks were avian predators with wingspans reaching 5 meters. Their talons secreted a paralytic toxin strong enough to drop a full-grown Kryn warrior in seconds. They nested on cliff faces and attacked anything that flew near their territory. A mining operation on Horizon 4 had been forced to reroute their supply ships because a pair of Shrike hawks had claimed the canyon as their hunting ground. Then something changed. The hawks built a nest directly above the main mining facility. They laid 3 eggs. When the eggs hatched, the mining crew expected attacks. Instead, the adult hawks began leaving dead prey animals on the landing pad. Fresh kills. The hawks would drop the carcasses and return to their nest. The human miners understood what was happening. The hawks were feeding them, sharing their kills. In return, the humans kept watch on the nest. When a storm damaged part of the cliff face, threatening to collapse the nest, the miners used their equipment to stabilize the rock. They worked for 6 hours with the adult hawk circling overhead, never attacking. Any other species that approached the nest was driven away with vicious strikes. But the humans could walk right beneath it. The third incident was still developing. Thornback crawlers on the desert world of Rustbelt had begun displaying similar behavior. These creatures were arthropods the size of large dogs covered in venomous spines. Their young were even more dangerous than the adults. Their venom stronger and their temperaments more aggressive. Yesterday, a human geological survey team had found a juvenile thornback caught in a collapsed burrow. They could hear it screeching inside. They could see the adult thornback nearby, digging frantically at the rubble but making little progress with its claws. The humans had excavation tools. They also had some basic sense of self-preservation. Thornbacks had killed 3 researchers last year, but the survey team leader, a woman named Ruth Okafor, made a decision. She ordered her team to dig. It took 2 hours to reach the juvenile. When they finally pulled it free, covered in dust and clearly terrified, Ruth wrapped it in her jacket despite the spines piercing the fabric. She carried it to its parent. The adult thornback could have killed her in seconds. Instead, it touched its offspring with gentle movements, then backed away. It sat down. It watched the humans, and it did not attack. Amira brought these cases to the Galactic Council's attention. She wrote a detailed report explaining the pattern. She included video evidence, biological data, and statistical analysis. The response came back within a day. Coincidence, human interference, possibly staged interactions for publicity. The council representative, a silicate named Quorum 5, suggested that humans were somehow manipulating these creatures, perhaps using pheromones or sonic devices. The alternative, that these predators were making conscious choices to trust humans with their most vulnerable offspring, was simply too improbable. Amira disagreed. She had watched the footage hundreds of times. She had analyzed the body language of the creatures involved. These were not confused animals. These were not manipulated responses. These were deliberate choices. She needed more evidence. She needed to understand why this was happening. The council had given her limited funding for a follow-up investigation, probably just to make her stop filing reports. It was enough for travel to 3 worlds and 2 weeks of research time. Amira began making arrangements. She would visit Verdant 9 first. She would talk to the farmers who had saved the Wrathcore hatchling. She would observe the interaction between humans and these deadly creatures. She would find the truth. As she packed her equipment, she pulled up the security footage from Verdant 9 one more time. The mother Wrathcore was still there, still watching. The hatchling had healed. It could walk now. The farmers had released it back into the forest 3 days ago, but it kept coming back. Every morning the young Wrathcore would approach the fence. The farmers would talk to it. Sometimes they would toss it food. The mother would watch from the trees, and Amira could see something in the creature's posture. Something that looked almost like satisfaction, something that looked almost like trust. Amira closed the file and shouldered her pack. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger than 3 isolated incidents. She could feel it. And she was going to find out why the galaxy's most dangerous predators were choosing to leave their young in human hands. Verdant 9 smelled like rain and growing things. Amira stepped off the shuttle onto soft ground that seemed to pulse with life. Everything here was green, from the grass beneath her feet to the massive trees that stretched toward the sky like living towers. The air felt thick and warm, heavy with moisture. Daniel Wright met her at the landing pad. He was a tall man with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands that spoke of years working the land. He smiled when he saw her, the kind of easy smile that people wore when they had nothing to hide. "Dr. Hassan, welcome to our little operation," he said, extending his hand. "I got your message about wanting to study our Wrathcore situation. Happy to help however I can." Amira shook his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to this. I know it might seem strange having a researcher show up asking about your farm animals." Daniel laughed. "Well, I wouldn't exactly call them farm animals. Come on, I'll show you." They walked through rows of crop fields. Amira recognized several varieties of grain that grew well in high-humidity environments. The farm was larger than she had expected, with several buildings and what looked like living quarters for at least 20 people. "We're a cooperative," Daniel explained as they walked. 32 families working together. Been here about 8 years now. Good soil, plenty of rain, no major predators that bother the crops." He paused. "Well, there weren't any predators near us until about 6 weeks ago." They reached a fence line at the edge of the cleared land. Beyond it, the forest began. Dense, dark, and full of sounds that Amira could not identify. Daniel pointed toward a cluster of large rocks about 50 meters into the trees. "She stays there most of the time," he said quietly. "The mother. She doesn't come closer, but she doesn't leave either." Amira could see her. The Wrathcore female was massive, even larger than the specimens Amira had studied in her research. The creature's crystalline scales caught the filtered sunlight, creating small rainbows across her body. She was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "And the hatchlings?" Amira asked. "Around here somewhere. They're getting bolder. Want to come up to the house?" They usually show up around midday. Daniel's home was a simple structure built from local wood and stone. His wife, Patricia, greeted them with cool drinks and a warm welcome. 2 children, both under 10 years old, were playing in the yard. Amira felt a spike of concern seeing children so close to where predators roamed. "Don't worry," Patricia said, noticing Amira's expression. "The little ones are safer here than they would be in most cities. The Wrathcore don't bother them. Actually, I think they like the kids." They sat on the porch and Daniel told Amira the full story. The injured hatchling that appeared at their fence. The decision to help it despite the danger. The long days of nursing it back to health while the mother watched from the forest. "We knew it was risky," Daniel admitted. But how could we just leave it there? It was hurt. It was just a baby. Didn't matter what species it was. Most species would have considered it a threat, Amira said. Or at best, not their problem. Yeah, well, we're not most species, I guess. The hatchlings arrived just after noon, as Daniel had predicted. There were 3 of them now. The original injured one, plus 2 siblings. They moved with surprising grace for creatures so young, their scales still soft and their movements uncertain. The largest one approached the porch with careful steps. Amira tensed, but Daniel just smiled. He reached into a bucket beside his chair and pulled out a large chunk of raw meat. He tossed it toward the hatchling. The creature caught it in midair and swallowed it whole. We don't feed them all the time, Patricia explained. Just occasionally. They hunt fine on their own, but they seem to enjoy the interaction. The children came running from the yard. Amira's heart nearly stopped when she saw Daniel's youngest daughter, maybe 6 years old, walk right up to one of the hatchlings. The creature lowered its head and the girl patted its snout. Sarah, gentle now, Patricia called out. Remember what we talked about? I know, Mama, the girl replied. They're still learning how strong they are. Amira watched in stunned silence as the children played near the young predators. The hatchlings were careful, almost cautious in their movements. When one of them accidentally knocked over a toy with its tail, it froze and looked toward Daniel, as if checking whether it had done something wrong. They're learning from us, Daniel said softly. Watch. He stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. He made a clicking sound with his tongue. All 3 hatchlings turned toward him immediately. He raised his hand, palm out. The hatchlings sat down. We didn't train them to do that, Daniel continued. They just started copying our gestures. Our tone of voice seems to matter to them too. If we speak sharply, they back off. If we speak gentle, they come closer. Amira spent the next 3 hours observing and taking notes. She recorded video footage. She measured the distance the hatchlings maintained from the children. She noted how the mother Rathkor had moved to a closer position once the hatchlings appeared, still watching but never interfering. As the sun began to set, the hatchlings retreated into the forest. The mother followed them. Daniel explained that they would return tomorrow and the day after that. They had established a routine. Dr. Hassan, Patricia said as they prepared dinner, can I ask you something? Why is this happening? I mean, I'm glad it is. But it doesn't make sense, does it? We're not strong like they are. We can't protect them the way their own mother can. So why do they keep coming back? Amira had been asking herself the same question. She had theories, but no solid answers yet. I think, she said slowly, it might be because you respond to their needs in a way their own species doesn't. The mother Rathkor can hunt for them and guard them from threats. But when that hatchling was injured, she couldn't help it. She couldn't splint a broken bone or clean infected wounds. She brought it to someone who could. But how did she know we would help? Daniel asked. That was the real question. How did any of these creatures know? Amira had no answer yet. She needed more data. She stayed on Verdant 9 for 3 more days. She watched the daily interactions between the Wright family and the Rathkor young. She interviewed other families on the cooperative who had similar experiences. She documented everything. On her last evening, something remarkable happened. The mother Rathkor came closer than she ever had before. She approached to within 10 meters of the porch where Amira sat with Daniel and Patricia. The massive predator looked directly at them. Then slowly she lowered her head until her snout touched the ground. Is that a threat display? Amira whispered. No, Daniel said, his voice filled with wonder. I've been reading about Rathkor behavior. That's submission. That's respect. The creature held the pose for several seconds, then lifted her head and retreated into the forest. Amira's hands shook as she made notes on her tablet. This was not just tolerance. This was not just circumstantial cooperation. This was something deeper. The next morning, Amira boarded her shuttle for Horizon 4. She had 2 more worlds to visit, 2 more mysteries to unravel. But already she was beginning to see the shape of something extraordinary. These creatures, these deadly predators from different worlds with no connection to each other, were all making the same choice. They were choosing to trust humans with their most precious and vulnerable offspring, and Amira was determined to understand why. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. Rows of seats rose in concentric circles around a central platform where speakers stood exposed to the judgment of representatives from 40 different species. Amira had never spoken here before. She had hoped she never would have to. "Your research is interesting, Dr. Hassan," Quorum 5 said from his elevated position. The silicate's voice resonated through the chamber like stones grinding together. "But it proves nothing. You have documented instances of human-animal interaction. Nothing more." "With respect, Council Member, these are not simple interactions," Amira replied. She tried to keep her voice steady. "These are consistent patterns across multiple species on different worlds. Apex predators choosing to leave their young in human care. Choosing?" Another council member spoke up. This was Fleet Commander Gareth, a Kryn warrior with scales the color of burnished copper. "Animals do not choose. They react to stimuli. Perhaps humans are using some form of chemical manipulation. Perhaps pheromones that mimic parental bonds." "We tested for that," Amira said. "No chemical agents. No sonic manipulation. No technological interference of any kind." "Then the animals are simply confused," Quorum 5 stated. "Or desperate. Injured creatures seeking any available help." "The Shrikehawks on Horizon 4 were not injured or desperate," Amira countered. "They were healthy, successful hunters with an established territory. They chose to nest directly above a human facility and formed a cooperative relationship with the miners there." The council members murmured among themselves. Amira could see skepticism on every face. She had known this would be difficult. The idea that humans possessed some unique quality that transcended species boundaries was simply too strange for most of the galaxy to accept. "We propose a test," Quorum 5 announced. "A controlled experiment. If humans truly have this alleged ability to gain the trust of dangerous offspring, it should be demonstrable under laboratory conditions." Amira did not like the sound of that. "What kind of test?" "We will provide a juvenile specimen from a known aggressive species. We will offer this juvenile to caretakers from different species, including humans. We will observe which caretaker the juvenile responds to most favorably." "That could be dangerous," Amira said, "for both the caretakers and the juvenile." "Science often involves risk, Dr. Hassan, unless you believe your theory cannot withstand scrutiny." Amira felt trapped. If she refused, the council would dismiss her research entirely. If she agreed, she was putting people at risk. But she also knew that without definitive proof, nothing would change. The council would continue to view these incidents as anomalies or accidents. "I agree to the test," she said, "under the condition that all caretakers are volunteers who understand the risks involved." "Acceptable. We will make the necessary arrangements." 2 weeks later, Amira found herself at the Xenological Research Facility on New Geneva. The facility was a massive complex dedicated to studying alien biology in controlled environments. She had brought 3 volunteers with her, all humans, all people who had experience working with dangerous animals. The first volunteer was Rebecca Foster. She had been a teacher on Earth before joining a conservation program on the colony worlds. She was in her 50s with gray hair and a calm demeanor that Amira found reassuring. Rebecca had spent 5 years working with rescue animals on 3 different planets. The council had also provided volunteers from other species. A Kryn warrior named Halleck, who came from a culture that valued honor and strength above all else. A silicate scholar named Prism 9, who approached everything with cold logic and precise calculation. And a Delphian trader named Whisper, whose species was known for their ability to adapt to any social situation. The juvenile they would work with was a thornback crawler. Amira had seen images of these creatures, but seeing one in person was different. It was roughly the size of a large dog, covered in dark chitinous armor with spines protruding from every segment of its body. Its eyes were multifaceted, glittering with reflected light. It moved with quick, jerky motions that made it difficult to predict. The juvenile had been separated from its parent 2 days ago. It was clearly stressed. It made high-pitched clicking sounds and scraped its claws against the floor of its enclosure. According to the facility staff, it had not eaten since its arrival. It had tried to sting anyone who approached. "The test is simple," Quorum 5 explained. He was observing from a protected gallery above the testing area. "Each volunteer will spend 1 hour in an enclosed space with the juvenile. We will monitor all interactions. Whoever achieves the most positive response will be declared the winner." "This isn't a competition," Amira said sharply. "Nevertheless, it is a test, with measurable outcomes." Halleck went first. The Kryn warrior entered the enclosure with confidence. He was nearly twice the size of the thornback, covered in natural armor that would resist the creature's stings. He approached directly, speaking in his species' language of honor and strength. The thornback retreated to a corner. When Halleck got too close, it lunged, stinger extended. Halleck blocked the strike with his armored forearm. The stinger broke against his scales. The juvenile made a sound like shattering glass and retreated further. It would not approach Halleck for the remainder of the hour. Prism 9 went next. The silicate moved with mechanical precision. It brought stimulating toys and puzzles designed to engage the juvenile's intelligence. It spoke in calm, measured tones about the scientific benefits of cooperation. The thornback ignored everything. It sat in its corner, clicking softly, occasionally scraping the floor. It showed no interest in the puzzles or the silicate's words. Whisper the Delphian tried charm and adaptation. Delphians could shift their body language and voice patterns to match those around them. Whisper attempted to mimic some of the thornback's movements and sounds. The juvenile watched with what might have been curiosity, but it did not approach. It did not relax. After 30 minutes, Whisper gave up and simply sat quietly for the remaining time. Then it was Rebecca's turn. She entered the enclosure slowly. She did not approach the thornback directly. Instead, she sat down on the floor about 3 meters away from where the creature huddled in its corner. She did not look at it. She did not speak. She simply sat. 5 minutes passed. 10. Amira watched from the gallery, barely breathing. The thornback's clicking sounds gradually decreased. Its posture shifted slightly, becoming less defensive. Then Rebecca began to hum. It was a soft, wordless melody. Nothing complex. Just a gentle rise and fall of notes. She still did not look at the creature. The thornback moved. Just a small shift, bringing it slightly closer to Rebecca. She did not react. She kept humming. Another few minutes passed. The juvenile moved again. Closer still. Rebecca very slowly extended one hand, palm up, resting it on the floor. She did not reach toward the creature. She simply offered. The thornback approached. Its movements were cautious, uncertain. It touched Rebecca's hand with one foreleg, testing. The spines on its body were still raised, ready to defend. But it did not sting. Rebecca spoke for the first time. "You're scared, aren't you?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Away from your family. In a strange place. I know how that feels." She slowly reached into her pocket with her other hand. She pulled out a small piece of fabric, soft and worn. "This was my daughter's blanket," she said. "She doesn't need it anymore. She's all grown up. But I keep it because it reminds me of when she was small and needed me." The thornback clicked softly, a different sound than before. Less distressed. "You're cold," Rebecca observed. The facility was climate-controlled, but perhaps not to the right temperature for a desert species. "Let me help." She very carefully, moving with extreme slowness, wrapped the fabric around the juvenile's back segment. The thornback could have struck at any moment. Its stinger was less than a hand's width from Rebecca's arm. But it did not strike. It settled into the warmth of the fabric. Rebecca began to hum again. The thornback moved closer until it was pressed against her leg. She very gently, with just one finger, touched its head segment. The creature made a soft, almost purring sound. They stayed like that for the remaining 20 minutes. The thornback gradually relaxed until its spines lowered completely. It fell asleep against Rebecca's leg, the soft fabric still wrapped around it. When the hour ended and Rebecca had to leave, the juvenile made distressed sounds. It followed her to the door of the enclosure. When facility staff brought food, for the first time in 2 days the thornback ate. In the gallery, the council members were silent. Amira did not need to hear their verdict. The test had proven what she already knew. Humans possess something unique, some combination of empathy, patience, and instinctive understanding that allowed them to connect with even the most dangerous and alien creatures. The juvenile's parent is in an adjacent facility, Quorum 5 finally said. It has been watching through monitors. According to our xenolinguists, it has been making vocalizations that translate to approval and gratitude. Amira smiled. "So what happens now?" "Now," Quorum 5 said slowly, "we begin to take your research seriously." Old bones told stories that living voices had forgotten. Dr. Leon Park knelt in the red dust of an archaeological site, carefully brushing dirt from a fossil that had waited 40,000 years to tell its tale. The African sun beat down on his back, but he barely noticed. He was too focused on what he was uncovering. Amira found him there, surrounded by graduate students and equipment, completely absorbed in his work. She had traveled to Earth specifically to meet him. After the success of the council test, she had received unlimited funding to continue her research. She wanted to understand not just what humans were doing now, but why. What in human evolution had created this unique ability? Leon was one of the few people who might have answers. He specialized in studying the relationships between ancient humans and animals. Most of his colleagues thought it was a waste of time. Who cared how prehistoric humans interacted with extinct species? But Amira cared very much, Dr. Park, she called out. He looked up, shading his eyes against the sun. He was a compact man in his 60s with weathered skin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Dr. Hassan, I got your message. Come see what we found yesterday. He led her to a section of the dig where several skeletons lay exposed in the earth. Amira recognized human bones, but there were other bones mixed in. Larger bones with different structures. Cave bear, Leon explained, pointing. Young one, maybe 2 years old. And here, look at this. The human skeleton is positioned with its arms around the bear's neck. They were buried together. Maybe the bear killed the human, Amira suggested. That's what we thought at first. But look closer. No signs of violence on either skeleton. No broken bones. No tooth marks. And see these objects? He indicated several carved pieces of bone lying near the skeletons. Jewelry. Decorative items. This was a deliberate burial. Someone laid them to rest together with honor. Amira knelt beside the fossils, her mind racing. A human and a bear cub, buried together 40,000 years ago. What does that mean? It means they lived together, Leon said. And when they died, someone who cared about both of them made sure they stayed together. This isn't the only site like this. We've found similar burials across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Humans buried with wolves, with big cats, with prey animals, with predators. He stood and gestured for Amira to follow him. They walked to a tent where he had set up a mobile laboratory. Inside, protected from the dust and heat, were displays of artifacts and more fossils. Humans domesticated wolves roughly 40,000 years ago, Leon continued. But domestication is the wrong word for what happened. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't slavery. Look at this. He pulled up images on a tablet. Fossilized footprints, human and canine, walking side by side. These tracks are from 26,000 years ago. Human adult, human child, and 3 wolves. They're walking together, not in a hunting formation. The wolves aren't trailing behind like subordinates. They're alongside like family. But wolves were predators, Amira said. They could have killed humans easily. Yes, and humans could have killed wolves. Both species were dangerous. Both were hunters. But somehow, instead of competing, they chose to cooperate. And it wasn't just wolves. Leon showed her more evidence. Paintings on cave walls depicting humans with various animals. Not hunting scenes, but scenes of coexistence. A human child riding on the back of a large mammal. Humans sharing food with predatory birds. Humans tending to what looked like injured animals. There's a site in Siberia, Leon said, where we found evidence of humans raising wolf pups alongside their own children. The den was inside the human settlement. The pups grew up with the human children. Some of them stayed when they became adults. Some left and returned with their own pups. That makes no survival sense, Amira said. Why would humans take that risk? That's the question I've been asking for 30 years. Leon sat down at his workstation. Every other species we've encountered in the galaxy evolved to either dominate their world or adapt to it through physical changes. Kryn got bigger and stronger. Silicates developed advanced processing abilities. Delphians developed social mimicry. But humans did something different. He pulled up a chart showing human evolutionary development. Humans evolved on what the galaxy calls a death world. Earth had extreme climate variations, dangerous megafauna, diseases, natural disasters. Humans were not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the most resistant to injury or illness. By all logic, humans should have died out. But they didn't, Amira said. No, because humans developed something more valuable than claws or armor or venom. They developed the ability to form bonds, not just with their own species but with others. They looked at a wolf and saw not just a predator but a potential partner. They looked at an injured bear cub and saw not just danger but something that needed help. Leon opened another file. We have evidence of humans caring for disabled members of their tribes for years. Individuals who couldn't hunt or gather. who couldn't contribute in traditional ways. Other predator species would have abandoned them, but humans kept them alive, fed them, protected them. Why? Amira thought about Rebecca wrapping the thornback juvenile in her daughter's blanket, about Daniel Wright splinting the leg of a Rathcore hatchling, about miners on Horizon 4 working for 6 hours to stabilize a cliff face to protect a nest. Because they saw something vulnerable that needed protection, she said softly, and they couldn't ignore that need. Exactly. It's not logical. It's not efficient. It doesn't always benefit survival, but it's fundamental to what humans are. They evolved in an environment so dangerous that the only way to survive was to build alliances, to protect each other, and somewhere in that process, the instinct to protect expanded beyond just protecting their own species. Leon showed her more images. Ancient human settlements with evidence of multiple species living nearby. Not livestock, not food animals, just living together, coexisting. When humans spread across Earth, they brought animals with them. Dogs, of course, but also cats, birds, even insects. They formed bonds with creatures that served no practical purpose. They kept them as companions. They mourned when they died. He pulled up a final image, a fossilized human hand preserved in remarkable detail. Worn into the palm were grooves, patterns created by repeated motion over many years. We analyzed these grooves, Leon said. They matched the motion of stroking fur, of petting. This person spent so much time touching and comforting animals that it literally wore marks into their bones. Amira stared at the image. 40,000 years ago, a human had spent countless hours offering gentle touches to creatures who could have harmed them, just as Rebecca had touched the thornback, just as Daniel's children patted the Rathcore hatchlings. It's genetic, she whispered. This trait, this instinct to nurture and protect vulnerable creatures, it's built into human DNA. I believe so, Leon agreed. And I think it gave humans an advantage that no one expected. Other species evolved to conquer their worlds. Humans evolved to make their world into a family. They domesticated hundreds of species, not through force but through bonds of mutual benefit and affection. And now they're doing the same thing across the galaxy, Amira said. They're not trying to. They don't even realize it's unusual. They just see something young and vulnerable and helpless and they respond. Every human culture has stories about this, Leon said. Myths about people raised by wolves or bears. Legends about humans who could speak to animals. Tales of heroes who showed mercy to creatures others would have killed. These aren't just stories. They're cultural memories of something real, something that made humans who they are. Amira spent 3 more days with Leon, absorbing everything he had learned. She studied the evidence of ancient human-animal bonds. She read papers about how human evolution had been shaped by cooperation rather than competition. She began to understand that what she was observing on alien worlds was not new behavior. It was the same behavior humans had been displaying for thousands of generations. On her last evening on Earth, she and Leon sat outside his tent, watching the sun set over the dig site. The sky turned orange and red, colors that reminded her of Rust Belt where the thornback crawlers lived. What will you do with this information? Leon asked. I'll write a report for the council, Amira said. I'll explain that humans aren't manipulating these creatures. They're responding to an evolutionary instinct that's been refined over thousands of years. They're doing what their species has always done, finding the vulnerable and protecting them. Will the council understand? I don't know. Most species can't imagine forming bonds with creatures outside their own kind. The idea of risking their lives to save something that might kill them seems insane. Leon smiled. It probably is insane. But it's human. And maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs. A little bit of insanity. A little bit of compassion that doesn't make logical sense. Amira looked at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Out there on dozens of worlds, humans were forming bonds with alien creatures. They were protecting offspring that weren't their own. They were building trust across the vast divides of evolution and biology. And they were doing it without even realizing how extraordinary it was. The galaxy is about to learn something, she said. They're about to learn that humans didn't earn their place among the stars through strength or intelligence or technology. They earned it through something much rarer, the ability to look at something completely alien and see not a threat, but a life worth protecting. Red Canyon earned its name honestly. The valley walls rose 300 meters on either side, layered stone painted in shades of crimson and rust by mineral deposits. Greg Hamilton stood at the edge of the settlement's defensive perimeter, watching the horizon for movement. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the red rock. Everything looked peaceful, but Greg had learned in his 20 years as a soldier that peace could shatter in an instant. "Sir, we're getting readings on the seismic monitors," Lieutenant Chen reported, jogging up to where Greg stood. "Multiple contacts, big ones, coming from the north." Greg pulled out his tablet and checked the data. Dozens of signatures, each one indicating something with significant mass. "Moving fast. Heading directly toward the settlement. How long do we have?" he asked. 30 minutes. "Maybe less." Greg activated his comm unit. "All personnel, this is Hamilton. We have incoming contacts from the north. Unknown hostiles. Begin evacuation protocols. Priority goes to children and non-combatants. Move to the emergency shelters now." The settlement transformed from peaceful to frantic in seconds. People ran to their homes to grab essential supplies. Parents scooped up children. The security team took up defensive positions. Greg had drilled them for this. They knew what to do, but there was a problem. "Sir, we need to talk about the pups," Chen said quietly. Greg closed his eyes. He had known this moment would come. The 3 Ravager pups they had been caring for were in their enclosure near the main building. They were 6 weeks old now, each one about the size of a large dog. Their armor was developing, dark plates forming over their backs and legs. Their teeth were sharp enough to tear through plastic. They were getting stronger every day. They were also completely dependent on the humans who fed them. "The evacuation orders are clear," Chen continued. "Nothing gets left behind that could be used as a hostage. That includes animals." "They're not just animals," Greg said. He started walking toward the enclosure. "They're children, and I'm not leaving children behind to die. Sir, regulations state that in the event of an attack, all non-essential personnel and materials must be evacuated. The pups are non-essential." Greg stopped and turned to face his lieutenant. "Chen, do you have kids?" "Yes, sir. 2 daughters. Would you leave them behind if someone told you they were non-essential?" Chen hesitated. "That's different, sir. These are predators. They're not human. Doesn't matter." Greg continued walking. "We saved them. We took responsibility for them. That doesn't end just because things got dangerous." The 3 pups were agitated. They could sense the tension in the air, hear the sounds of people running and shouting. They paced in their enclosure, making high-pitched whining sounds. When they saw Greg approach, they rushed to the fence. Greg had been in combat situations on 4 different worlds. He had faced enemy fire, explosions, and situations where death seemed certain. But looking at these 3 young creatures who trusted him completely, he felt something that frightened him more than any battle. He felt responsible. "It's okay," he said softly, unlocking the enclosure. "I'm not leaving you. We're going to figure this out." The pups tumbled out, surrounding him. They were big enough now that they could knock him down if they all pressed against him at once. But they were gentle, pressing their heads against his legs, seeking comfort. A younger soldier ran up. "Commander Hamilton, the perimeter guards are reporting visual contact. It's Ravagers. A whole pack. At least 40 of them. Ravagers. The apex predators of Red Canyon. Wolf-like creatures with armored hides that could shrug off most small arms fire. They hunted in coordinated packs and could bring down prey 10 times their size. A pack of 40 could destroy the entire settlement. Where did they come from?" Greg demanded. "We've never had Ravagers this close before." "Unknown, sir. But they're not attacking. They're just gathering at the northern perimeter. Watching us." Greg felt ice run down his spine. He looked at the 3 pups pressed against his legs. 6 weeks ago, they had found these pups abandoned in a ravine. No parent, no pack, just 3 helpless newborns that would have died without intervention. Now a pack of 40 adult Ravagers was outside the settlement, watching, waiting. "They're here for the pups," Greg said. "This is their pack. The parents are out there. Then we should give them back," Chen said. "If we return the pups, maybe they'll leave. Or maybe they'll see us as kidnappers and attack anyway." Greg thought fast. Every instinct from his military training said to evacuate. Take the humans to safety. Let the pups take their chances. That was the logical choice. The smart choice. But Greg Hamilton had never been very good at making smart choices when someone needed help. "Cancel the evacuation," he said. "Sir, cancel it. Everyone returns to normal stations. No one makes any aggressive moves. Lower the defensive barriers, Commander. That's insane. If those Ravagers attack, we'll be completely exposed. They're not going to attack. Greg hoped he sounded more confident than he felt. Chen, get me a medical kit and 3 harnesses. Large size. While Chen went to find the supplies, Greg knelt down with the pups. They sensed his anxiety and pressed closer. He stroked their armored heads, feeling the hard plates that were still growing. Your family is here, he told them. They came back for you. That's good. That's what families do. The pups whined. The largest one, the female that Greg had started calling Red because of the distinctive rust-colored patch on her shoulder, licked his hand. Her tongue was rough, already developing the rasping texture that adult ravagers use to strip meat from bones. Chen returned with the supplies. Together they fitted the pups with harnesses. The creatures were confused by this, but they trusted Greg enough to allow it. When all 3 were secured, Greg attached long leads to each harness. What's the plan? Chen asked. I'm going to walk out there, Greg said. I'm going to return the pups to their pack. And we're going to see what happens. Sir, that's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way we all survive this. Greg stood up, holding the 3 leads. If anything happens to me, you take command. Don't attack unless they attack first. Understood? Understood. But I'm coming with you. Chen, you have 2 daughters, which is exactly why I'm coming. They need to grow up knowing their father did the right thing. Not the safe thing, Greg smiled. All right. Let's go meet some angry parents. They walked through the settlement. People stared as they passed. Someone shouted for Greg to reconsider. Children waved at the pups. The 3 young ravagers stayed close to Greg and Chen, uncertain about where they were going but trusting the humans who held their leads. At the perimeter, the security team had indeed lowered the barriers as ordered. Beyond the fence, the pack waited. Greg could see them clearly now. Massive creatures, each one easily 3 times the mass of the pups. Their armor was fully developed, dark plates that caught the dying sunlight. Their eyes glowed with reflected light, and at the front of the pack, larger than any of the others, stood what had to be the alpha. A male ravager with scars across his snout and 1 broken fang. He watched Greg with an intensity that was almost human in its focus. Open the gate, Greg ordered. Sir, I really think we should reconsider, one of the guards said. Open it. The gate swung open. Greg and Chen walked through, the 3 pups following on their leads. Behind them, the entire settlement held its breath. Greg walked forward until he was about 20 meters from the pack. The alpha ravager took a step forward. The rest of the pack tensed, ready to charge. Easy, Greg said softly, though he did not know if the creature could understand his tone. We're not here to fight. We're here to bring your children home. He knelt down and unclipped the leads from the harnesses. The 3 pups hesitated, looking back at Greg. Red whined softly. Go on, Greg said. It's okay. They're your family. The pups moved forward slowly. The adult ravagers watched, utterly silent. When the pups were halfway between Greg and the pack, they broke into a run. The adults surged forward to meet them. There was a chaos of movement as the pack surrounded the young ones, touching them with their snouts, making low rumbling sounds. Greg stayed kneeling. Chen stood beside him, hand on his sidearm but not drawing it. They waited. The alpha ravager finished inspecting the pups. He turned his attention to Greg. The massive predator took 1 step forward, then another. He crossed the distance until he was standing directly in front of Greg, so close that Greg could feel the heat radiating from the creature's body. Could smell the scent of blood and earth on its breath. The alpha lowered his head. His snout touched the ground between his front paws. It was a posture of complete submission, the same gesture the Wrathcore mother had made on Verdant 9. Then the alpha did something unexpected. He turned and made a series of barks and howls. The pack responded. They began to move, spreading out into a wide semicircle around the settlement, not attacking positions. Defensive positions. They were forming a perimeter. What are they doing? Chen whispered. Greg understood. He felt tears sting his eyes. They're protecting us. We protected their young, and now they're returning the favor. Over the next 3 days, the Ravager pack stayed. They hunted in the canyon and brought their kills back to share with the humans. When a group of canyon stalkers, another predator species, attempted to raid the settlement's livestock, the Ravagers drove them off with brutal efficiency. The 3 pups spent their time running between the pack and the settlement, belonging to both worlds now. On the 4th day, the pack began to leave. But 6 of them stayed behind. The 3 pups now growing rapidly. The alpha male, and 2 females, including the one that had to be Red's mother. The alpha approached Greg one final time. The creature looked at him with eyes that held intelligence and understanding. Then slowly the Ravager opened his mouth and gently took Greg's hand between his jaws. The fangs could have torn through flesh and bone, but the alpha held with perfect control, applying no pressure. Just holding. A gesture of trust. Greg touched the creature's scarred snout with his other hand. "You're welcome," he said. "Anytime." The 6 Ravagers that stayed became permanent residents of Red Canyon. They hunted for the settlement. They guarded the perimeter. The pups grew up learning from both humans and their own kind. And every human in the settlement learned something important. They learned that protecting the vulnerable, even when it made no logical sense, could create bonds stronger than any wall or weapon. Amira had presented to crowds before, but never like this. The Galactic Council chamber was filled beyond capacity. Representatives from every known species had come to hear her final report. Some stood in the aisles. Others watched through remote feeds from their homeworlds. The attention was overwhelming. She stood at the central podium, her research displayed on screens that surrounded the chamber. Images of humans with alien creatures, data showing the patterns she had documented, footage of interactions that should have been impossible. "For 6 months I have studied a phenomenon that defies conventional understanding," Amira began. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "I have observed apex predators from multiple worlds entrusting their most vulnerable offspring to human caretakers. I have documented these interactions across 17 different planets and involving 23 separate species. Today I will explain why this happens." She pulled up the first image. Daniel Wright with the Wrathcore hatchlings. This is not manipulation. This is not coincidence. This is the result of a unique evolutionary trait that exists in humans and, as far as we can determine, only in humans. Quorum 5 spoke from his seat. What trait could possibly explain such unlikely behavior from both humans and alien predators? "Empathy," Amira said simply, "combined with what human psychologists call pack bonding. But these are inadequate terms for something much deeper." She advanced to the next image. Rebecca, with the thornback juvenile. Humans evolved on a world with extreme environmental pressures. They were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest or most physically resilient. Logic suggests they should have developed traits that made them better individual survivors. Stronger, more aggressive. But humans evolved in the opposite direction. She pulled up Leon Park's research. The ancient fossils. The evidence of cooperation between species. Humans developed the ability to form emotional bonds not just with their own species, but with any creature they perceived as vulnerable or in need of protection. This trait appears to be genetic. It manifests in all human populations regardless of culture or upbringing. When a human encounters something young, helpless, or injured, they experience a powerful instinctive response to protect and nurture. Fleet Commander Gareth stood. But why would predators respond to this? Why would they trust humans with their young? Because humans respond to infant characteristics across species boundaries, Amira explained. Large eyes relative to body size, small rounded features, helpless movements. These trigger protective instincts in humans, and crucially, humans do not distinguish between their own offspring and the offspring of other species when these triggers are present. She showed footage from the Council's test, Rebecca wrapping the thornback in her daughter's blanket. Observe how this human female immediately recognized the juvenile's distress and responded with physical comfort. She spoke to it in the same tone she would use with a human child. She shared an object that had emotional significance to her. She was not calculating benefit or risk. She was simply responding to a creature in need. Amira advanced through more images. Greg Hamilton with the Ravager pups. The miners on Horizon 4 working to save the Shrikehawk nest. Human after human across dozens of worlds all doing the same thing. Protecting creatures that could easily kill them. The predators recognize this response, Amira continued. They may not understand it intellectually, but they recognize genuine care when they see it. They see humans willing to risk their own safety to protect offspring that are not their own. They see humans providing comfort, medical care, food, and emotional support. She pulled up comparative data. I tested this with other species. Kryn warriors provide protection through strength and discipline. Silicate scholars provide intellectual stimulation and logical care. Delphians provide social adaptability. All valuable traits, but none of them provide what humans provide, which is, Quorum 5 asked. Love, Amira said simply. Unconditional, illogical, instinctive love for vulnerable creatures. Humans bond emotionally with offspring that are not their own. They grieve when those offspring are hurt. They celebrate when they thrive. They sacrifice their own comfort and safety to ensure the young are protected. She showed the final piece of evidence. The Wrathcore mother bowing to Daniel. The Alpha Ravager taking Greg's hand in his jaws. The Thornback parents' vocalizations of approval. These predators are not confused. They are making rational choices based on observation. They see that humans will care for their young with a dedication that often exceeds what their own species can provide. Not because humans are stronger or smarter, but because humans cannot help themselves. They are biologically driven to protect and nurture the vulnerable. A Delphian representative spoke up. This seems like a weakness. An exploitable trait. It would seem that way, Amira agreed. And in some situations it could be. But consider the results. She pulled up data from Red Canyon. After Commander Hamilton protected the Ravager pups, the adult pack formed a permanent alliance with the human settlement. They now provide protection and hunting support. Similar patterns have emerged on every world where humans have cared for alien young. More data appeared. Economic benefits. Reduced conflict between human settlements and local predator species. Successful conservation efforts. Species that had been endangered were recovering because humans could not bear to see them disappear. Humans have formed more interspecies alliances in 50 years than the rest of the galaxy has achieved in 5,000 years, Amira stated. Not through negotiation or technology, but through simple acts of compassion. She let that sink in. The chamber was silent. There is something else, Amira continued. Something I observed consistently across all my research. When humans care for alien young, they do not expect gratitude or reward. They do not negotiate terms. They simply help because help is needed, and the creatures they help remember this. She showed footage of Daniel's farm. The 3 Wrathcore, now fully grown, massive and deadly, but gentle around the human children. Protective. These are apex predators that could destroy that settlement in minutes. Instead, they guard it. Why? Because years ago, those humans saved a wounded hatchling. Because those humans showed compassion when they did not have to. Amira pulled up her final image. It was a composite, showing dozens of human settlements across the galaxy. Each one surrounded by creatures that should have been threats. Wrathcore and Ravagers and Shrikehawks and Thornbacks and countless others. All living in peace with humans. All protecting the same settlements that had once protected them or their young. The galaxy has spent millennia trying to understand what makes a species valuable, Amira said. We measure strength. We measure intelligence. We measure technological advancement, but we have forgotten to measure something equally important, the capacity for compassion, the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from species across the galaxy. Humans are not the strongest species. They are not the smartest, but they possess something that the galaxy desperately needs. They possess the ability to look at something completely alien, something that could kill them, and see not a threat but a life worth protecting. They form bonds across impossible divides. They create families out of strangers, Quorum 5 stood. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly he bowed his head. It was the silicate gesture of respect, rarely given. Your research has changed our understanding, he said, not just of humans, but of what we should value in all species. We move to recognize human caretaking abilities as a unique and valuable galactic resource. The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, Amira returned to Verdant 9. She wanted to see where it had all started. To see Daniel and Patricia and their small farm that had somehow changed the galaxy's perspective. She found Daniel in his fields, working the soil. The 3 adult Wrathcore were nearby, resting in the shade of large trees. When they saw Amira, they raised their heads but did not move. They recognized her scent from her previous visit. Dr. Hassan, Daniel called, waving. Heard your presentation went well. You're famous now, Amira laughed. I'm a scientist. We don't do fame. But yes, the council accepted my findings. So what now? What changes? Everything and nothing, Amira said. She watched as Daniel's youngest daughter, Sarah, ran past the Wrathcore. The massive creatures watched her with gentle eyes. Humans will continue doing what they've always done, caring for creatures that need help. But now the galaxy understands why. And more importantly, they understand that this trait is not a weakness. It's a strength, Daniel nodded. He looked at the 3 Wrathcore. now vital parts of his farm and family. Never felt like I was doing anything special. Just seemed like the right thing to do. You see something hurting, something that needs help, you help. That's all. That's everything, Amira said softly. She stayed for dinner that evening. The family gathered on their porch as the sun set. The three Rathkor settled nearby, close enough to be part of the group but giving the humans space. They were protective but not possessive, loyal but not dependent. Patricia brought out food and they ate together, talking about crops and weather and the small concerns of daily life. Sarah told a story about school. Daniel's son talked about his plans to start his own farm. Normal life, simple life, but surrounded by creatures that elsewhere would be considered deadly threats, surrounded by bonds that transcended species and evolution and logic. As darkness fell, Amira looked up at the stars. Out there, on hundreds of worlds, similar scenes were playing out. Humans and aliens building unlikely families, creating bonds that should not exist, protecting each other not because they had to, but because they could not imagine doing otherwise. The galaxy had finally learned what Amira had discovered in her months of research. They had learned that strength came in many forms, that intelligence could be measured in many ways, that the ability to care for something vulnerable, to protect something helpless, to love something alien, was perhaps the most important trait any species could possess. They had learned why even the fiercest beasts entrusted humans with their young, because humans saw those young, not as alien creatures or potential threats, but as children who needed protection, and humans would not turn away from a child in need. It was not logical. It was not always safe. It was not the smart choice, but it was human. And in a galaxy that often valued strength over compassion, that made all the difference. Amira smiled as she watched Daniel's family interact with their unusual neighbors. She thought about Rebecca and the Thornback, about Greg and the Ravagers, about countless other humans across the stars who were, at this very moment, forming bonds with creatures they had just met. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was a very good thing,